Alright, so the first thing we want to do is establish the shot. And we're going to do that by grabbing our lasso tool and just going in and blocking out all of the major forms. We want to break the image down into its major compositional elements and just sort of establish the general composition of the shot. So I'm looking at the building, the brickwork, the water, the boat, the shadow, all of these large shapes, value areas that sort of jump out at you when you first look at the image. You want to establish that first read. I'm also going to go in here and put in the downpipes and a few of the windows and things, just because they inform us early on of the perspective of the shot and allow us to more accurately place other elements within the image. It's important at this early stage to try and practice good layer hygiene. And by that I mean that we should be keeping all of the major compositional elements on their own layers. This is going to be so helpful later on because we can actually use those shapes that we've defined to make selections that we can work within without affecting the surrounding areas. This is going to allow us to make big, bold strokes without the fear of messing up all of the other details we've got in the drawing. And it just makes things look a lot more confident. So take a bit of time, get those layers organized, and it's just going to save you so much time in the long run. One important thing that I forgot to mention is we're not using the color picker for any of this. We're taking this as a learning exercise, so we want to try and train our eye to pick the correct colors from the color wheel. Now this can be quite difficult because you're also picking the value. And what you just saw there with the screen flickering black and white was me checking my values. I did this by creating a hue and saturation layer right at the top of my layer structure and just dragging down the saturation bar to 0. That'll remove all of the color information from the image and allow us to just sort of check back with the image and make sure that all of our shapes are reading. Values are the skeleton of the image. Color is very much secondary to it. If your values aren't correct, the image doesn't read. So be careful, check your values, and make sure that all of the major forms are reading. Alright, so we're just about done here, blocking out all of these major shapes, and you'll notice that your eyes are kind of being drawn towards the two people in the back of the boat. This is our focal point. It's the area of most contrast, and it also occupies a really comfortable place within the composition, with a lot of leading lines and a lot of visual interest. So it's the star of the show. Everything else in this entire image is just kind of like a supporting actor. And what we need is for those elements to either lead our attention towards the focal point or kind of just fade away into the background and not take up too much of our attention. Now that we're done with the major block-in phase, it's time to go in for some preliminary details. So the main objective of this stage is to just kind of turn the forms and start giving the image a bit of perspective. So I'm just going to go in and really start carving out all of the different planes here. This is quite time consuming, so we're going to jump forward. There we go. Now you'll notice that I haven't gone overboard with the details just yet. I placed everything in there, but it's all really rough, and that's what we want. What we're trying to do here is slowly raise the overall detail level of the image consistently throughout the whole process. So we start with the major forms, then we add in the major details within those forms, and we just kind of work in bit by bit as we pass over the whole image, adding layer upon layer of additional detail until we're happy with the entire piece. Now there's nothing really important happening right now, we're just adding details, so I'm going to step back for a bit and just wait for this to come together a little bit more. So we're starting with the water now, and this is something that I want to talk about because water is really interesting to draw. It's very complicated, but if you get it right, it can look fantastic. So I want to explain a little bit the physics of light that's going on here, because it'll help you be informed when you're drawing from imagination or when you're trying to layer your water. But we'll get to that in a second. First things first, we need to understand the very basics of how light works. I think it's very important to understand things from a fundamental level. It helps inform you of what's really going on there, and that helps you to build a solid understanding if you start from the foundations. So let's go. All light that comes from the sun is white light. And in a physics sense, white light is light that contains all the colors of the spectrum, but it represents itself to the human eye as a type of white. All of the colors that exist within our world are actually that same white light that has interacted with objects in the environment and had certain wavelengths removed or absorbed by those objects. For example, white light would shoot from the sun, fly through space, and then bounce off that brick wall. That brick wall absorbs every spectrum of that white light except for the spectrums that represent the orangey browns, and then the light bounces off there and into our eye, and we perceive it as orange. So now that we have a basic understanding of what's going on with the light and how it's acting, we can begin to apply these principles to how it's interacting with the water. So let's have a look. As the water gets further and recedes away from us, it becomes closer to the horizon line and becomes more parallel to our eye line. Any light that's bouncing off the water at that point is more likely to be just skipping off the surface at a sharp angle and coming directly into our eye. And when it does that, it doesn't interact with as much matter, so it has fewer wavelengths removed from it, so it represents itself as white. And this is what a specular reflection is. But then when we look at the shadow, it's coming up as blue. So what's happening there? Well, a shadow by definition is not in direct sunlight, so it's not getting that initial interaction with the white light. What you're seeing is light that is scattered in the atmosphere, picked up the blue color from the nitrogen in the atmosphere, bounced down into the shadow area, and then skipped off the surface into your eye. So it's giving you that blue color of the sky. And the last thing we want to notice about the light is the way that these shadows are not really clearly defined. We've got these nice soft edges, and the reason for that is that a lot of the light that's coming down from the sky is going to penetrate through the surface layer of the water and then start scattering off all of the impurities and particles within the water before bouncing out and into our eye. So because it's bouncing around for a while, it's not going to be so clearly defined. It's going to become more diffuse and sort of scatter around. Now, I hope that wasn't too deep and heavy for you guys, and I hope it increased your understanding of what's really going on there and maybe sort of made you think about the process of doing this photo study a little bit differently. We're not just copying, we're trying to understand, and that's the important thing. You can copy for days and learn nothing. You can just be like a robot reproducing what you see. But you're never going to learn anything if you don't really try and dig into why things look the way they do. And that's what I really want to teach you guys, is to try and learn from an understanding point of view. That's what we're really trying to do here. This is training so that we can learn how to bring our imagination to life and create personal pieces from imagination that look believable and real. And that only comes when you fully understand what you're drawing. So getting back to the piece now, you can see me starting to add in some of the more final details. And I just wanted to talk about this a little bit because this is another important thing that took me quite a while to learn. And that is trying to figure out exactly how much detail to show. Sometimes when you start out, or I know that when I started out and I see beginning artists work, you see that sometimes they get stuck in details and really kind of ruin their composition by showing too much information. And what I've done here is I've made some bricks pretty loose. I've tried to keep them loosely defined and just kind of brush them really haphazardly with a bunch of different colors so that they look a little bit mottled. And I've copied that across into the distance. But each time I copied that brick texture, I removed more information from it the further it got into the distance, because the human brain is pretty sharp, and if you have just a small area that is defined looking like bricks, your brain will just fill in the rest of the information and perceive that entire area as being made of brick. So you want to keep most of the detail around your focal point and then just slowly fade the detail away as you recede into the distance. And speaking of focal points, I finally made around to trying to detail that up. I wanted to try and take advantage of that black line that was coming through the composition at the bottom of the building by having a figure standing on top of it, but it didn't work out. I couldn't get the body language right, so I ended up removing one of the characters, and this feeds back into, this is your image. It could look any way that you want it to look. So don't be afraid to add and remove things from the composition. This is your picture. So we're just about done here, just putting on some of the final touches. Hope you enjoyed it and found it informative, and I'll see you guys next time.